which many African countries sees, as a nation that we can emulate or something like that. But their foreign ministers are giving us another type of message, which I think we must be very, very careful about. We will ask him and others to try to keep their hands off Ghana. We have our problems in Ghana. We have our way of developing things. We don't want them to impose things for us, things on us, to accept and develop. I'm making references to recent men of the Western world telling us about the homosexual, lesbian. We take care of our gender issue, our sexual issue, we take care of them. When the time comes, we are seeing the problems already. We don't need to impose that on us. They should keep quiet. They should let Ghana develop the way we want to do. That's the only place we have, If it goes to hell for Ghana, it goes to hell for all of us. But we hope there is a certain hope for Ghana. And that's something we have to keep and make sure we take care of it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will now call on our first speaker, and that is Mr. Baba Labinga Ibrahim. He's particularly very keen on calling his name the correct way, so I'll let it. Baba is a research fellow in economic and political science, and he will be sharing those ideas with us today.
I'm going to talk about the multi-ethnic and multi-religious conflicts in Africa. But we cannot talk about this in isolation from the rest of the world. So to start with, I will try to give a little background about how these religious conflicts have started and what is fueling it. Now, let's take our minds back to Afghanistan. Some time ago, the Russians invaded Afghanistan, and the idea was they were going to install a communist regime. So the rest of Western nations, some who thought that they will not allow communism to come to Afghanistan, try to fight back. And it's the way they did to fight the Russians, some of the consequences we are having today. What especially the CIA did was to recruit hardened religious fanatics, form them into a guerrilla, and most of them call themselves the Mujahideen, heavily financed by Saudi Arabia and co. And they took these people to Afghanistan to fight. In fact, not only that, apart from the religious, the zealousness of their fanaticism was what was motivating, thinking that by killing or fighting the Russians, they are fighting a war for God, for Allah. Now, what happened later on was that they won. They actually defeated the Russians, and the Russians were forced to leave Afghanistan. Now, the effect of this was that they got emboldened. They got really believed in their cause, that this is the way to go, and that if they could defeat Russians and free Afghanistan, then they could free other nations as well from kind of regimes that they don't want. And their first target was that when these people, the war ended and they were going back, those who went to Saudi Arabia saw that there were American troops, American female troops, and they were living a life which, to their belief, was inconsistent with Islam. So from Afghanistan came the next problem, that they want to be free. Now I'm going to speak Swedish, but sorry. They want to free Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries from the infidels, as they call them. Then came the problem. Then Americans and the rest realized the problem. That's where Bin Laden and all those other people came in. So now this local jihadism in Afghanistan became a global thing. Not only that, they were not satisfied with the Saudi Arabia, they tried to move everywhere. Then came 11 September 2001, which is still part of this movement which was going on. And now the reaction to this was to go and invade Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then they even became even more emboldened. It goes on. Now I'm giving this background because it has kind of found its way into our continent, which is very sad because we were not part of this to start with. And the painful thing is that those who are talking loud today about this jihadism and things were the same people who financed them, trained them with weapons, supplied them with weapons, gave them the most sophisticated training they could because their enemy at the time was Russia. But now that okay, let's say Soviet Union, that's the right way. So now that they ended that one and they knew they could do that, then they thought, okay, we turn back and the others. Unfortunately, this is linked to our multi-ethnic societies we have in Africa. And now, in every country in Africa nowadays, you have people from different tribes and then different religions. But until this jihadism started, we never had these kind of religious conflicts in Africa. Even if it is, it should be very localized. That it was not on that extent that people are taking bombs and guns and shooting each other. If I were to take Ghana, for example, in fact, in many places, you have, like where I was born, for example, I know that the only thing we don't do together is to go to the church or to go to the mosque. But we did everything together. When there's a celebration or funeral, we all go to the funeral. When there is a outdooring of maybe we all went. When there is a Salah, we all ate food. When it's Christmas time, and our parents never stop us Muslims from going to the Christian families. It wasn't a problem. We
intermarried too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Intermarried.
Yeah. Yes. And exactly, especially the women. When women, normally it's the women who have to convert when the Muslim have to marry them. or the man have to convert if he wants to marry a Muslim girl. But this it wasn't a problem. You see a family, 2 or 3 people are Christians, 1 or 2 people are Muslims, and we never forsake those who went to other religions. It never happened. In Medina, for example, there's a house, and you see one is a mosque, one door is a mosque, the other door is the church. And we have coexisted all this time. So now, to understand what is going on today is that you don't only look at what is going on in Ghana or in Africa. It's not the main problem. The main problem is an outside thing that is trying to gain influence, that's trying to invade our society, using these weaknesses about ethnicity and religious differences to achieve their main goal. So, yeah. So now, if given this situation, then you ask, how are they able to infiltrate and cause this trouble? Then comes the problem of our political weaknesses, our leadership, which maybe is failing in many respects, the downturns in our economy, so that a few people are getting richer and more people are getting poorer. Now, if somebody who is having economic problems or having life tough, and then someone comes and said, oh, look, this life on earth is nothing. Just pursue this line of religion, and your life after death is funny. It's just like that. It's all right. You will not have any problem. Now, desperate people normally accept anything. And the recruitment of people through these religious means has been a problem. And now, if I were to talk again about the external involvement, now there's a conflict between what we call Wahhabism from Saudi Arabia, and then maybe Shiaism from Iran. Both of them are investing heavily in Africa now. In Ghana, for example, there are few people who are being offered scholarships to study religion in Saudi Arabia. Now, the effect of this is that most of these studies are not studies in science and technology or things that they are science in religious fanaticism. Or maybe they don't see that way, but their view, their perspective of what religion should be. In fact, Wahhabism has been a very local sect of religion in Saudi Arabia. It never went outside. But now, the attempt to export these things to the rest of the world, and then against the other type of religious groups also who are trying to resist, have started this religious conflict. Most people will say that Islam is a violent religion, Islam is this, Islam is that. Without knowing the background of these differences, you would think all Islam is not, if you take the Quran for example, it's not advocating violence and things. It is the interpretation of these few groups which are causing the trouble. Now, because of this situation in Africa, where poverty and all these religious conflicts, people, politicians trying to use religion as a means of coming to power or maintaining power, this is how Western, sorry to say, this is how outside influences of the religion is taking hold in our countries. And so far we are lucky in West Africa, apart from Mali, but who knows, we are not immune to the consequences that will come later on. This is why at a day like this, when we are commemorating our independence, we have to reflect again on this situation that is coming nearer and nearer to us. It started in Northern Africa, it's coming to Mali, slowly in Chad now, in the Central African Republic, and then who knows, in the northern Nigeria. And it's good for a day like this to reflect about the consequences of these things. Anyway, now, when we have a political system which is not very strong, or when we have leaders which are more concerned about themselves than the population, then it is very easy for this kind of inter-ethnic conflicts to strike. And it's enough to say that, look, this guy is from northern region, so all the development in the country is happening in the northern region, and he's doing nothing to the rest of the country. And people just believe it. Oh yes, Muhammad is from the north. Go and see the north. He's giving out this, he's giving out, and it is enough. Because in a situation where the communication, illiteracy, and they say is a means of spreading knowledge, and it can be very dangerous. Good old days, I don't know how many remember when a Ghanaian head of state made a decree against the CDC. Oh yeah, it was Kutuachombo. He made a decree against rumor mongering. Anyway, so these are points that we have to realize and reflect upon, and to see how we can move on gradually so that we don't have a situation where these multi-ethnic conflicts become eventually a stable thing in our societies. All African countries have these differences, as I said before. We are managing so far, but so long as the economy is doing well, so long as we have a proper political system where leaders are thinking about their people, we are sure that these things will be able to halt them, or probably to limit them to small scale, so that they will not become serious as it is in Central African Republic and other areas. Yeah. Also, I think that maybe this is a big background that I have to give, and then maybe during the course of discussions, other things could be said. Yeah.
It's very fascinating to see how Baba has given us food for thought, and how our little Ghana can be dragged into problems from other places, like far away places like Afghanistan and Russia. We will be going away from here today thinking about what little we can also do to influence our dear country not to fall into such problems. I've just been prompted that we forgot to hold a 1 minute silence for Felix. He's going to be buried today. It's never too late, so we want to do it now before we continue. So please stand up. There will be question time, so reserve your questions. You may write them down and ask Baba afterwards. It will be in the form of a discussion. And now I will call upon Mr. Texan also to share his ideas with us.
Just two small details. I attended a seminar last Saturday, thanks to the Ghana Union, or to AFRIS, I don't quite remember. It was a very important seminar on Africa and investment possibilities, Africa as a future market. And among the speakers, there was also the Minister of Finance, Anders Borg. He was there, and he spoke a very, very brilliant speech he gave. And of course, it was organized by Swedish Employers Association. So members of the association had to pay 6,000 to come just for 1 day, morning to evening. And non-members, like the Ghana Union, we had to pay 10,000. Just for that, it's serious, to be there. I managed to get there thanks to the Ghana Union. The president wrote to the Employers Association to tell them that we are interested, we would like our people to know, but we couldn't afford 10,000. So they gave us a free entry to the attendance to the seminar. The food was quite good. A lot of pens, so that's also a way for me to get my pens, and I know how to save them. One thing which the finance minister said, which was a little disheartening, about Ghana. You know, in West Africa, Ghana's economy has been listed as one of the most highly appreciated developing economies. But there is a problem. There is a slide now, he said, because it's beginning to turn a little downwards. And when things like that happen, they also affect the political system. And that reminded me of what I had heard the day before. I think everybody knows here that the city is really falling fast in Ghana. So this really gives us something to think about, that maybe this economic upturn, which we thought was taking place, was not really an upturn. Well, I think Baba would know it better than anybody else. Yeah, we have oil. The oil is flowing. We have gold. The gold is going. So how do you explain this downturn? I don't know. We shall discuss. I have no answer. Maybe together we can find a solution to that, an answer to that. I know that the parliamentarians, they have increased their salaries and backdated their salaries, and that's very expensive. It costs the nation a lot of money. They are staying in government finance, bungalows or palaces. They don't pay rent. Even water bill, they don't want to pay. Electricity, everything is paid by the government. When I was at home last year, Obetsebi Lante's son, it's a big scandal, you know. He got a house, a complete house, bought or got. And the government, didn't agree that it was properly purchased. So they took it from him. But then he went to court, and then in the name of democracy and human rights, he had to get this his house back. A house for which was built with state money, tax money, paid by you and me. Even if we are not in Ghana, we are still paying. He just took it, just as a gift. How can such a thing happen in this country? There are so many such things. Number two, I had the privilege of being invited to a seminar on March 6th, actually, at the Swedish Army Museum. And it was a seminar organized to commemorate, to honor Ghana's independence. And I had the privilege of listening to one, I don't know his title, but the way he looked, very strong and, lordly, high, tall person. He must be a captain or a general or somebody in the Swedish Army. At any rate, I was told that he was, what do you call this person again? A military historian, military historiker. Well, we were not very many. And I think it was good that, I had the privilege of attending, because sometimes we think we know a lot about our countries, but in fact, we don't. I learned a lot of things with him. The first statement which he said was that Cape Coast Castle was built in Accra. And in my life, I have never heard this statement before.
Was that one of the things?
One of the things that I learned. Very impressive. And in fact, he didn't even know where Cape Coast was. And from time to time, he looked at his notes, and the whole history was centered on Accra. I'm a Ghanaian, so Accra is the capital of Ghana, so I felt proud about it. But I thank him for teaching me. Cape Coast Castle was built in Accra. So you have to write down in your notes. He also made another statement, which I think was equally, enlightening for me. In fact, Mr. Roth came very, very close to denying that the slave trade ever took place. What he said was that the Europeans were there, and the Africans came with their slaves and sold them. So it means Europeans were innocent Europeans there, and then people came with their slaves. Maybe Africans even forced the Europeans at gunpoint to buy the slaves. He didn't say that, but that was a conclusion I drew from his speech. And he said the slave trade, Sweden's presence in Africa, it was born in parenthesis. It was a short thing, and it was just a slight or an incident in Swedish history. If you take the whole of Swedish history, then this is just a mere detail, insignificant detail in Swedish history. Oh, he said that. And as for the local population, the Europeans were there. They sold, what did he say, mirrors and sugar, or was it salt? I don't think he even mentioned gold. Salt, and then the Africans came with their people, and the Europeans bought them. So that was all. After that, he packed his notes, and then he walked out like a military man out of the place. And then everybody went home.
You didn't ask him any question?
Well, he made one statement. No, somebody who tells you Cape Coast Castle was built in Accra. You can't discuss it. There's nothing you can discuss. If he had brought it a little, maybe it would have been built in Winneba. Yeah. Then we can negotiate and move it a little. Very close. Even if he had taken it to Kasua, okay, geographically, Kasua is part of the central region. Yeah. Well, I could have agreed this was a slight, error, but he repeated it twice, actually. But to take it to Accra, I think that is too far. Yeah. So there was no way. He also said it changed hands, Cape Coast changed hands, and finally even the Swedish Commerce Collegium came to buy some shares or something in the company. So my question just pointed out to him that, the Commerce Collegium doesn't invest in trade which is not profitable. Because sugar and salt. How come you agree with me? Salt is just. Then he agreed. And I said that, whether it was Swedish or Danish or whatever, it was all, everybody, they all took part. He said, that's it, but it was short-lived. I said, short-lived, 12 years. But anyway, I had no intention of arguing, so he left. But I'll write to him, and I suggest that the Ghana Union probably invites him here to come and teach us more about.
No, I don't hear.
You yeah. Then maybe you will know that Cape Coast Castle was built above the time. So that is these are the two things I have to say. Now I am supposed to speak about Africa as a zone of peace and security, but I will place the whole thing within an international perspective. So you will excuse me if I miss the local, details. We have already heard about the international perspective. What happens in Africa is not in Africa alone, it's not in isolation, but we have to relate it to what is happening globally. And I warn you in advance, it's a very boring topic I am going to take up, and discussions will follow, so I can have more enlightenment, especially about Cape Coast. Now, we have a lot of problems in Africa, in Ghana, in Africa. Corruption, we know we have to increase the level of education, we have to, democracy, human rights, we have to improve women's rights, trade, health, clean water, agriculture. Child, infant mortality in Africa is quite high, and we have to bring it down. We have to think about problems of development, infrastructure, wealth distribution, investment, how to turn this economy which is declining now in the midst of plenty. We have oil and the economy is declining. So these are many problems we are facing. Ethnic and domestic conflict, but why do we choose to speak about this particular, about Africa and international security? Well, I think there are many reasons for that. You cannot progress or be happy when you don't live secure, when you are not secure, when your possibility of defending yourself against attack is almost nil. You cannot have economic progress and enjoy or spread it so that all the population the whole population benefits from that. If you have to think about protecting yourself, investing in your army and such things. You cannot think about Ghana living in peace when the French army is just next door. What are they doing in the Ivory Coast? In the Upper Volta, they are there. So this means that we have a problem in Africa. That is the problem of security and the problem especially of military security, not of one country as such, but of the continent as a whole, which has to think about that. Wars, they create refugees problems, they create tension between neighbors. You cannot have your economy running, Baba cannot have the economy running and in good shape when there is war across the country and when there are refugees flowing in every day. These are all things we have to think of. And then also, most of the seminars which are organized in Africa, Ghana, they don't consider these issues. The issue is completely neglected, even though it is very vital. When we get the so-called help to organize seminars, just about AIDS, I'm not saying AIDS is unimportant. We have to be healthy. No, but it's not only AIDS. Bullets, they also kill human beings even more than AIDS. So we have to take into consideration such realities when we are discussing our issues. I'm not saying that women's rights is not important or that infrastructure development. No, that's certainly not. But what I'm going to doing now today is something part of it, but a little different. Now, we also know that when you have pockets of prosperity, whether it's in Africa or elsewhere, where you have a group of countries or a group of people living very well, there's a danger that if there is no security, general security, that those who have more will try to use their power, their money and everything, even to get more money. Internationally, globally, we are told that economic prosperity brings peace, it brings security, it brings happiness. Well, that is true, but what we are not told is that in a world where Others are strong, militarily, especially economically. Where others are weak, the rich, the powerful, the strong, they don't always use their money to create more prosperity for them. They also look around to see who is weak. So if you are weak in a world where there are strong people and you don't take measures to organize yourself and your neighbors, the one who is strong will turn his eyes, look around, and then in the long run, you may be a victim. We have proof of that in history. People were colonized, whole populations were wiped out, and this is still going on. So prosperity per se, where there are many others who are weak and destitute, doesn't really create happiness. You have to do it yourself. And I'm sure when Ghana and Africa prosper, we won't be any different. If we are also prosperous and strong, and there are others who are weak, we are likely, we'll be tempted probably to look around, take their land, take their resources, and this is part of human nature. So we have to take consideration to think about security, not only for ourselves, but for the continent as a whole. The independence of Ghana, we know, is inseparable from security in the rest of Africa. The question of having security for Africa as a whole, it was been raised before. Nkrumah was one of the chief proponents, or maybe the main proponent of this idea of having common security for Africa. It is not to threaten anybody. We can't threaten Europe, we can't threaten America, we can't threaten our neighbors when we all have a common security in Africa. But when you have a stronger security, common security, it deters the man who is coming to invade you, or the woman coming to invade you, because today we are all equal. Man and women, we all hold guns. They will have to think twice if you are strong, or you are trying to help neighbors to organize themselves. Then it will be more difficult, it's not impossible, it's more difficult for anybody to disrupt your economy or to make things more difficult for you. That is why he proposed an African High Command. I remember there was a time when France had problems with the 10,000. Because the external enemy is always deterred when there's a common security policy in a place. Otherwise, it starts catching people, catching countries one by one. France had a military base in Tunisia, Bizerta. And the Tunisians were claiming the military base back, that the French should leave. It became a big fight, and many Tunisians were killed. Nkrumah went on the TV to warn that, look, what is happening? If the enemy had known that in attacking Tunisia, it would be attacking the rest of Africa, then it could have deterred the enemy from attacking. But that was not the case. France has units, military units in almost all the former colonies, almost all of them. Why? What is the problem? These people are not threatening France, but to have a military unit in the country is a very serious thing. That it has so many other consequences. So, number one, we demanded, Nkrumah and others demanded, that foreign military bases on African soil must be closed, and that Africa must establish an African High Command. Let's take a slight look at this African High Command for the whole continent. Now, why is such an idea necessary, or even for a region? This is because the world is globalized. You cannot, as Ghana or as Nigeria, do anything against another country, let's say France. If France is coming to Nigeria for some reason to support groups against each other, there's nothing deterrent. The Nigerian army alone cannot. But if we have a common defense system, there will be a protection, If there's a problem in one country that generates another problem which threatens to break up the country, and to cause a flow of refugees, economic structure, economic turning down, destruction of infrastructure, people dying, and you have a common agreement, neighbors or African countries come together, but not to crush one or the other, intervene in order to save lives. And when this happens, it will not be to intervene so that Nigeria can export goods there or Ghana can export goods there, but it will be genuine intervention in the sense that we want to stop a war, we want to stop problems, we want to see our neighbors prospering. But if you leave such a mission to an outsider, and then you have a problem, because the outsider has his own problems and his own intentions. Now, if we look at the world today as it is, we say that the world is unipolar. Before it was bipolar, that is the Soviet Union and then the United States. And that, through some balance of terror, it managed somehow to check the one from doing what it wanted. So there was some sort of balance based on terror. America couldn't do what it wanted, the Soviet Union couldn't do. Both have to think about the consequences. So in a way, the world had some sort of balance. It was bipolar. There were many problems also, African countries, they were all looking for bases here and there, but there was some sort of balance. Now, what we have now is unipolar. That is, there is only one superpower, that is the United States. And we have seen the consequences of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. What can America not do today? I mean, I'm not against the United States or anybody. I'm against American imperialism. Maybe some of you here don't know, they don't believe in imperialism. They think imperialism is a figment of the imagination. It is not, it's a reality. America alone can today decide to do anything anywhere. The United States has how many hundreds of bases around? We will look at it very soon, the map. So that when America decides to act, there's no check. America has gone to Iraq twice. The first one, without mandate from even none of them, they had no mandate from the United Nations. But it was claimed that Iraq had mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction. A million people have died in Iraq, even more than that, because if you count the embargo which was placed on Iraq, the country was forbidden, it couldn't even import medicine, to treat. So many children have lost, millions, I think, of children have lost their lives before the American invasion. And it was a lie. There were no weapons of mass destruction, nothing. United Nations experts who were sent there, including a Swedish expert, what was his name again? Kai Bill, my God.
Hans Blix.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Hans Blix. He told them that they have been there, they didn't find any weapons of mass destruction. Bush just brushed him aside and then straight away they waited. What has happened? Iraq is in ruins. Now the civil war is emerging, there's the same Iraq. Not enough of that. America has invaded Yugoslavia, split the country, divided it into bits. Serbia, America has been there. America has been to Afghanistan, still there. Any place America chooses to go today, they can go. They can walk in and bomb and Libya, even we don't even talk about Libya. America has been there. Sweden was there also, the European Union. So we are living in insecurity, and it's very, very dangerous. I am one of those who believe that a war can start. War may not be started as a design, but it can as an accident. It may be triggered off by misunderstanding, and there are nations today who have weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons. So it's a unipolar world we live in, and it's not safe. The bipolar, where there were two, had problems. Nobody was really safe either. But this one, nobody's safe. It's only one power. Now they have started issuing ultimatum to Russia about Crimea, forgetting that Crimea was a Russian territory before it was not ceded, when it became Soviet Union. Khrushchev, I understand he was even drunk when he signed the paper to, detach Ukraine. One man signed the paper to detach Ukraine and then make it part of
You mean the Crimea?
the Crimea, sorry, made it part of Ukraine. as part of the Soviet Union. So Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. And this we are not being told. There's so many things we are not being told because this is a world dominated both by way of information, media, military, and everything by one unipolar. Then, there are also three actors, even though it is unipolar. America is the leading one, but America has also the European Union. So there are three actors. I identify the European Union, America, and then they have their military power wing, NATO. NATO is an aggression and an organization, a military power bent on aggression. It was formed to protect Western Europe when? At the time of the Soviet Union. So NATO should have been dissolved actually when the Soviet Union collapsed, because what were they doing? Well, you are defending yourself against somebody who has already collapsed the country. Instead, NATO has advanced basis upon basis upon basis around the whole globe, and now even threatening the Soviet Union. They're threatening Russia. NATO may decide today to send a small battalion to take over Ghana if we try to play the fool, to play along. And there's no force anywhere which can stop them. So Russia. No, Russia today will not be able to face NATO at long distance, because Russia is strong, but they can't project military power. I don't challenge you. You are a military man yourself. You must be able to project power across oceans. Russia doesn't have that capacity, or as much as the Western. So we have European Union, and the European Union, I'll tell you something about the European Union. It is one of the most undemocratic organizations on planet Earth. There is no democracy in the European Union. I deal with that, so I know, I think, a bit about its history. It is the elite of Europe, Western Europe, afraid that now they have lost their economic power. So they cannot do anything now unless they are together and then supported by the United States. Then they become a global force. Europe, Sweden, France, Germany by themselves, they are small countries, but together, then they are a force, a global force to deal with. So together, they can also do anything they want, of course, with permission from America. And America won't stand in their way unless there is something else. So these three organizations are now ruling the world against African countries which are separate entities. No. China is coming up, India is coming up, but that will take time. So we are really at the mercy of these three giants. In addition to that, they have the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund. It's an organization which creates poverty. The World Bank, they all create poverty. Baba may disagree, but they create poverty actually. And they are the wings of the European Union, NATO, and America. And then unipolar, the three principal actors, and then another very dangerous development. The European Union, NATO, and especially America are now working together with religious extremism, with Al-Qaeda. There is no doubt Libya, it was these three powers together which helped the Al-Qaeda to execute Gaddafi. So Libya today is ruled by Al-Qaeda. And in fact, some of them who took part in Libya, some of them who are power, those who are power in Libya today, at least one prominent man, he was even a prisoner at Guantanamo, where the Americans placed the so-called Al-Qaeda terrorists. He was there until the Americans released him, and I think by agreement, he went then to Afghanistan and trained, and now he's, I've forgotten his position, but whether the prime minister, but anyway, high post he has in Libya. And many of those who were there, they were also in Afghanistan, where they fought against Russia. So America now has organized them, and they have taken. There's no government in Libya today. The African Union tried to intervene to advise the Western powers to negotiate. They were just brushed aside. Who was Africa? Even if we're a union, who cares about you? During the attack on Libya, at the same time, there were refugees who were just left to drown because NATO didn't have time. The planes were needed and the ships were needed to guard the coast so that they could bomb they could bomb Libya. So these are the problems we are facing today in Africa. So the unipolar, the three, the IMF, NATO, and then their cooperation of these, together with the extreme Al-Qaeda elements. Never believe anybody who tells you that the United States is fighting Al-Qaeda or is fighting. It's not. It may be true strategically. Maybe they have a problem here, but the United States, the CIA, is very closely working with these elements. Africa. That's a third point. As Africa is a continent on the siege. So I'm going slowly to this point that in the first place we are disorganized. Well, not disorganized, but we are different. With so many different armies, about 53 different armies, not united nor organized. We are facing a world which is not unipolar, which is not bipolar, where the two balance, but we're facing a world which is unipolar. Not only that, it is unipolar, there are three actors nobody can challenge. They have the economic power through the IMF, they have the IMF, the World Trade Organization, etc., which can cripple Ghana's economy in a second. Iran's economy has been crippled, completely crippled. There are details which we can't go into here now. And now we have to face. So Africa, in addition to that, apart from the fact that we don't even have a common military or defense path or defense organization, we are also a besieged continent. If you take Africa, East Africa, let us say well, excuse me.
No problem, no problem.
How do you... Mapuche, I tried to, because I thought we could have the overhead, but they tell me the overhead is not working, which I could have copied and shown here. Now, okay, these three, well, they were done by the Swedish woman. I'm not so keen on that so much. We take the north. Now, if you take Egypt, from Egypt to Morocco, the United States, they look at the Mediterranean. American and NATO ships patrol the Mediterranean on every day. And the Egyptian army, how many, Egypt gets subsidy to the tune of some billions, I don't know. 3 billion, yeah. $3 billion a year for the Egyptian, not for economic development, for the army, Egyptian army. Look at that. So the Egyptian army is a business concern. I'm sure if anybody attacks them, they may even be more interested in saving their businesses than in fighting for Egypt. So it's a military, and they are so dependent on the United States. Israel gets maybe 4 or 5 times more than that. $5 billion a year, dollars. So, come to Libya is now an American colony. You have Al-Qaeda and America ruling Libya. Tunisia is a pro-American system. Algeria, it's somewhere, but America has influence. Algeria was once a revolutionary country, but not today. Morocco is an American colony, and Morocco has occupied Sahara. This area, which should be an independent country, is occupied by Morocco. And that is the reason why Africa is against that. That's the reason why Morocco is the only country in Africa which is not a member of the African Union, because Africa doesn't support the occupation of West Sahara. Yeah. All right. So everything there is in the hands of the Americans and NATO. Here you have the Canary Islands, which is also African territory but occupied by Spain. If you look here in Morocco, there are 2 spots, Ceuta and Melilla. I have been there. I've been to Ceuta before. There are 2 spots projecting into the Mediterranean Sea. When Morocco became independent, Spain refused to give them. So these 2, they are Spanish territories on Moroccan soil. If we had been a strong power, we would have kicked the Spaniards away in 2 days. And this is not the case. They are there. So it's to tell you that from east to west, the whole stretch, something nobody talks about, it's occupied. Not for economic help, but militarily. And you understand, militarily, with weapons and military bases. Americans once had a base here, somewhere in Libya, which Gaddafi closed. That's one of the reasons why they were after him. I think now the whole country even belongs to them, and I understand they are even now training the Libyan army, whatever they call it. So here, North Africa is besieged, it's occupied. Now, calm down. Okay, let's go here to East Africa. Ethiopia, if I'm talking too much, I mean, I think you can stop me so that we can continue with other things, you know.
Okay.
Ethiopia.
You can talk another 10 minutes, Mr. President.
10 minutes?
No, you look at the time.
No.
Okay. I'll make it 100 minutes.
Okay.
Ethiopia, they have a drone. I won't talk about drones, everybody knows. They have drone bases. So it's occupied. Look at Djibouti. Djibouti is a small former French colony. It is the most militarized territory on African soil. There are thousands, not hundreds, thousands of American and French troops in Djibouti. It's a small country. It's a Somali territory, but the French took it and made it an independent country. You know, so it's independent, but it's occupied. Look at during the time of the Cold War, the Americans had a huge military base, Kagni, in Ethiopia, which is now converted into something else. Somalia. Now, the whole Western powers, their military, their armada, has occupied all this place, from the Red Sea up to the Indian Ocean coast. So the whole coast of Somalia is occupied. We are told that they are fighting some pirates there. Well, I'm not a pirate and I have never seen a pirate in my life. But I know that it all started when European trawlers started taking fish from Somali territory and soil in the sea. And people went there to challenge them and to catch them. Eventually, the few people who caught them, they found out that it was more profitable catching Europeans and taking money than fishing. So they started catching them and claiming ransom money. And then the Europeans say, hey, these are pirates, you know. So they have started. If you have pirates in Somalia, I mean, how many weapons do they have? You can even send the Ghana Navy to challenge them to a way, or the Navy here. But the whole Western Europe, the whole Western world, including NATO, they have got their military, their navy in the Indian Ocean chasing pirates. What pirates? Which pirates? So, yeah, and apart from that, they have their navies visiting Madagascar. The whole Indian Ocean is occupied. South Africa is not free. We have Central Africa here. The central part of Africa, Congo, it's a long story, but let me cut it. I won't go into that. And then there, in West Africa, you have, don't mistake me for here, this area, the whole area about this Bukum Faro, what Nigeria, and all, it's a European created distortion. Nigeria has always had, we have always had this religion, as you said, low-key problems. These elements become more dangerous when you have foreign powers coming in with their own design. It's not to stop these quarrels, but to inflame it and use it as a pretext. Now, if you have, we have opposition parties in Ghana to the one, and there are problems in Ghana, America can just arm the other one and then come in to take the country. So Mali, the problem of Mali is that after the downfall, after the execution of Gaddafi, people with their arms started moving south. And those who executed Gaddafi, they are allies of NATO and the European Union and America. So these same allies, when they move down here, then they become enemies. In Libya, they were allies. They were helping them to bomb and then when they continued their mission, then they were labeled as Al-Qaeda. So, east to west, everywhere, Africa is a besieged continent. What are we doing? This is not a problem. Okay,
You just
so
have to touch it after 1
here
minute.
and here,
Touch it all the time. So it doesn't go to sleep.
And you know that in Germany, America has a so-called Africa Command,
Yeah.
which is supposed to take care of our, and then there are military interventions here in South Sudan everywhere. So what I'm saying is that these are problems no single country in Africa can deal with, not even a group of countries. But together, the African Union, or the so-called African Union, has a military mission which is studying these problems. But if you Kenya is occupied everywhere, you know, it's a problem. So we have to think of these things and make a plan about it. Now, Africa is a disease region. The consequences of having foreign military bases on your territory, well, this is something we don't need to go in. Your independence is restricted. You cannot do what you want. The person who you invited to come to help you to have this, tomorrow he can turn against you and make you Islam without any problem. I understand the French who came to Mali, they are now negotiating with the rebels to hand over northern Mali or part of it to the rebels. And the Malian government is not allowed to enter that area.
No.
The Malians were applauding when the French came. Now the French are negotiating with the rebels, and the Malian government has been warned, you have no business here. So these are things, you know, which we don't hear, that they are true. So you have a very heavy cost of having a foreign army on your territory, your independence. You cannot do what you want. You will also risk being overthrown. The army, the president, the regime in Ivory Coast was installed by the French. Tomorrow, if Ouattara tries to do something against them, they will overthrow him. They will put him aside. These are problems we have to consider and deal with. I will conclude because there are too many things, but I will conclude by suggesting that together, what can we do? What can Africa do? We are developing countries with small economies. What can we do? These are the things we have to discuss together to see. But my suggestion is that these governments we have, they are not governments who are working hand in hand with their people. So if there is problem in Ghana today, I mean, the average Ghanaian really doesn't care because what is happening? He doesn't have any benefit from the oil or from anything. We have no popular democratic approach to our problems in our countries. So the people cannot support us. So they cannot support the government, which means if the government, say the government of Ivory Coast, decides to drive away the French, the government is certainly going to need the help of the people, but the people do not support the government because it's not a democratic government. They don't recognize there are so many basic problems there. So there are programs for the government who invites them but tries to get them. But we really have to have a democratic approach, and all these foreign bases will have to leave African soil because they are also the cause of so many problems. The moment you accept a foreign base, the other person, you become a target, which means if there is war, if there is anything, you have to be attacked because you have the enemy's base on your territory. We have to reflect on these things. I will round up now by saying that what regards Africa, we have a security problem which nobody really discusses or talks about. It's not a problem of our creation, it's as a result of the global environment as it is today, where you have only one power together with its satellites, the European Union satellites, and then NATO dominating everything. And the very moment these things continue, we are driving going into that direction. The United States can intervene anywhere. In its history, America has intervened and in I think more than 700 coups, overthrow of governments or attempted overthrows and murders have been committed by the United States. It's well documented in its history, from the Philippines, everywhere. There are a lot of things, more than 700. So intervening in Africa is nothing. And if we leave things as they are now, this is what is going to happen, and our development is going to be curtailed.
Yeah, I'm wondering if she would like to come and then.
No, yes.
Eh?
Yes, we should hear her.
Yeah, I think it's necessary before.
Friends of the African family. First of all, I would like to thank you so much for inviting me here to share this special day with you. And I would like to start by congratulating Ghana and Ghanaians all over the world on your special day. And I would also like to congratulate the Ghana Union for the work that you do. You are one of the oldest and the most stable Afro-Swedish associations, and we really need you. And I remember some of you were around when it was storming a bit in the African diaspora, was in 2008. And for me, the Ghana Union was one of the stable forces that helped to keep it all in place. And I will speak from my background as an anti-apartheid activist. And in Sweden, I'm an activist against racism and discrimination. And my field is international aid cooperation. It's also my field of research, where I've worked a bit as advisor to African governments in different aspects, employed by CEDA, Oxfam, but also by Forum Swede. I would like to touch on 3 issues here today. One is, as a South African, is our gratitude to Africa. When Nelson Mandela died, I was speaker at several memorial services, but no one ever mentioned the contribution of Africa in the struggle against apartheid, which was actually one of the most important contributions. And I saw this, and I would really like to thank Africa and Africans. I saw these inputs at first hand. I traveled quite a lot. I was part, working for CEDA, of training the ANC in exile up in Kronfors. So these people were coming to the training from all parts of Africa. And I felt that Africa gave us homes, you supported us, and you inspired us. And I'm very grateful for that. And I know that some African countries paid a very high price because the apartheid regime retaliated. They bombed, for example, Malawi, parts of, and they also had these killings, were infiltrated. But another thing that has surprised me with the passing of Nelson Mandela is the expressions, how is South Africa going to survive without him? And it seems like people think that Nelson Mandela was a product of the West. He wasn't. He was a product of Africa. He embodied the best of us. He was one of us. And the struggle against apartheid involved many people. And he firmly believed that we can all aspire to greatness. The other aspects that I'd like to touch on are the African Union's Global Diaspora Declaration of 2012 and the situation of people of African heritage in Sweden. If I start with the AU Global Diaspora Declaration, please inform yourself about it. It is on the internet, and many of you most probably know about it already. It was a process that was started in 2003, and the final declaration was written 2012. I was invited to be part of a team that was going to finalize the version of it. I was then invited to attend the meeting of foreign ministers and the meeting of heads of state. And I was so proud to be African during that process. And I think of our children and many of us who are supposed to be ashamed because we have an African background. And I remember wishing that I will leave a book with you of 25 young Afro-Swedes describing their lives in Sweden. And I wished then that these children could see Africa at its best. South Africa was given the mandate to promote and to facilitate the work, the whole process from 2000, I think it was 2006 that they were given that. And they also have to finance quite a lot of it. So the people responsible for making it happen in Sweden is the South African Embassy. And I've reported back to the South African Embassy and to all the African ambassadors in Stockholm from this meeting. So I don't know how many of you know the background to this declaration. It was initiated, I hadn't realized this until I was at the AU Summit in Pretoria 2012, was that it was initiated by African academics, by African Americans in the US and Pan-Africanists in the Caribbean, where Africa seeks to reconnect with the diaspora and their children, either those that were forced to leave through slavery and those that left by choice. So they have a definition of the African diaspora is that it is somebody who has at least 1% African blood in them. But, you know, because like in the United States, you know, you have all these generations through slavery, but Africa wishes to connect with people of African heritage. And the intention of the African Union is that the diaspora organizes itself in democratic and inclusive ways so that they can participate in the intentions of the declaration. And we can say that the intentions of the declaration consist primarily of two aspects. One is involving the diaspora in discussions on the future of Africa. And I was really grateful for the two lectures before and how you connect us also with Africa and gave a very good presentation of the situation. And so in this declaration, the African Union opens up for our involvement in discussions about the future of Africa. The other aspect is cooperation, where we actively work together with Africa on the field, in the areas outlined in the declaration. And if I summarize the program of action, one of them is the development of an African Union diaspora volunteer program. And this is very interesting because even I've worked for CEDA for 20 years. And CEDA has always said that they will include people from the countries of origin in their volunteer programs, but this has never happened. And when I've asked CEDA, why didn't this happen? They say, well, you know, we didn't really get the chance to do that. And the other thing is that Africa is interested in the establishment of a skills database. So they know the African qualifications outside Africa. Because just now they are bringing in quite a lot of consultants. And these consultants are picked up in Europe and they are often part of the conditioned international aid cooperation. And this then is, because one of the discussions was that why doesn't Africa say what they need? And I've taken up this discussion with them, but they prefer to turn it around to see what are the skills of Africans outside Africa. And we need to tell our children about this, because now we have a situation in Sweden where especially children of African origin know that their chances of getting to middle management and top management, of getting jobs. I lived in Husby for a while, and in the corridor there were people holding degrees who couldn't get a job. So, and our children need to know that there is also Africa is also an alternative. And the second thing is that the African Union would like the diaspora to organize themselves in regional networks, where they would like then this discussion, this dialogue, which in the beginning would be as observers, but they want us to develop where we have 5 regions in Africa, where the diaspora would be the 5th region. And what is happening just now is that things are moving very fast in the United States and in countries like Holland, but in our side of the world, we've had a few problems, so to say. Also, in the long term, there is the issuing of an African Union passport for people in the diaspora to develop the transnational and the transcontinental identity. And when at this meeting, there were countries that were very much for it, and I think Ghana is one of them, Senegal, Benin are really pushing for this, whereas others are still a bit. But what the African Union has as an intention is to work this so that the final product is that Africans in the diaspora can have African Union passport, opening to settle anywhere in Africa and to do business freely with any part of Africa. And very interesting for us, and this is one of the areas where I really, because we had meetings, we had discussions, and we really thrashed things out. And one of the things that the African Union is working for is the elimination of racism in the countries where the diaspora lives. So there is also that concern. They are looking for increased economic partnership and business ventures between Africa and the diaspora. And somebody mentioned, I think it was you, perhaps you, on these business seminars, like now we have Business Sweden, which is thinking very much on investing in Africa. And this also opens up for possibilities. Because honestly, personally, I'm just sick and tired of being discriminated against. You know, and I think it's time that we do everything we can to grab hold of the situation and, you know, to be able to leave our mark. Then also the African Union is looking for cooperation between the AU and the diaspora around education, research, arts, culture, media, and the promotion of a more balanced picture of Africa. And again, in the United States, they are moving very fast. And what they've done now, because the diaspora has had some problems organizing themselves, is that they are cooperating with, say for example, if the Ghana Union got together something and wanted to start, you don't have to go back to see, oh, is there a Swedish organization, can we work through that? You can do things on your own directly with the countries of interest or with the African Union. So and then I've thought a lot about how can we help Africa? And I think the first thing is to recognize the achievements of Africa. Whether, we do have problems, I'm very much aware of that. I'm very much aware that even in a country like South Africa, we're still having some really serious problems of poverty and lack of health care for certain groups. But it is also important to see that research and business are doing quite well. We have women in key positions in business, academia, and politics. But these are seldom spoken about. There is a preoccupation of this helpless African woman that, for some reason, the West needs. And I think we must be part of the voices demanding better terms of trade. We must contribute to an honest and realistic portrayal of Africa. And Africa has resources and potential, and I really feel it is so important that the African leaders, individually and collectively, ensure a dignified future for all Africans. And we must help them to achieve that, both by challenging them and making demands, but also by helping them. We have our African brothers and sisters dying on the high seas. We have them languishing in jails because they are forced by circumstances to find something better. The other thing is that Africa must recognize their expertise and the validity of African solutions. Even listening to the two lecturers today, I thought, how do we create situations so we can be heard in the universities? Like Sancton, for example, they invite me and say, oh, please come and listen, we have this international thing. So I say, okay, you're talking about Africa. Who are the Africans lecturing on this? No, you can participate from the floor. I said, no. If I'm coming, I want to sit and be the one part of those making a statement. You can't, you can't föra min talan, as they say in Swedish. We need to state our own business. So I I think we in the diaspora can help to support that process. So I'll move rapidly on then to the situation of the people of African descent in Sweden, because this is something that I feel very strongly about. And we all know these problems. We all know what the problem is from our personal experiences. And I find that as parents, we are often not just dealing with the racism that targets us, but even worse, we are trying to do our best to handle the racism that targets our children. And I remember my own pain when my children were called the N-word and they were told to go home to Africa. And they were harassed and they were beaten, and this is happening today in Sweden. If this hasn't happened to your children, you are very lucky. And I remember the desperation when my daughter came home one day and she asked me, she was crying, and she said, "What is an N and where's home?" And she said, "But can't we just go home? We can't deal with this anymore." And home was apartheid South Africa. And my world shattered. And like you, I'm also very much aware of how Africa is presented in the Western media. These negative generalizations, the selectivity, this constant focus on our failures. And unless you mention the failures and the positive aspects, then you are lying. And unfortunately, it is these negative stereotypes that seem to define who we are as Africans. And now we have scientific reports. There are 3 that have come out just during the last 4 years. There's one 2010 by SCB, which it says born in Sweden but different. And it looks at the second generation. It looks at our children and adoptees. And what shows very clearly there is that they are also subjected to racism and discrimination. Whereas the argument has been that we are unemployed because we can't speak the language. These people were born here, or they came here as 6-year-olds. So, and the second report is by the FN Verbunden. They came up with the report last year. And now there's a new one, an Afrophobia report, which Mångkulturellt Centrum has written, and that came out this year. And what these reports say, all of them is that it is the Africans and the Roma that are the most discriminated. And nothing has changed. There has been absolutely no improvement. We are subjected to frequent Afrophobia through humiliation, exclusion, and open racism. We are discriminated against in housing, in employment. We get the lowest returns for our inputs in the cost of education. And this is why some children do not see the point of studying. And it's difficult to find jobs. We are most often overqualified for you know this. We are overqualified for the jobs that we do. When we do get jobs, we seldom end up in middle management or senior management. We are subjected to hate crimes, physical violence in schools, in shops, and in housing areas. And the hate crimes against people of African descent have increased by 24% recently. Few people report, they distrust the police and the judiciary, and even when they do report, it very often doesn't lead to anything. Also, we have a general aspect, because I'm part of a network, of an informal network, that works also with African women. And what we are finding is harassment of African women in the universities, in the places of employment, and very often they leave us feeling ashamed, like it's something that we should be ashamed of. And also we find that with these, with African women, very often they take away their children. Social services, at the slightest problem, they take the children away. And what type of pressure are these families being subjected to? I've been also active in different court cases where, when it comes to custody of the children, it is the white Swedish father that gets the children. If these women are beaten by their Swedish husbands, almost nothing happens. Whereas if it's a black man, they jump to attention. So we've had women that have been beaten sleeping on mattresses in our flats for up to 2 weeks. They don't get the information of who they should turn to. And also, we have problems with establishing businesses. How can we help each other? How can we create networks? So, to try to round up, what can we do about our situation in Sweden? We must engage in our situation here, together with the positive forces, together with the people that are not racist in Sweden. We must embrace the opportunities that Sweden provides. We are taxpayers and Swedish citizens. Because sometimes we forget that. You know, because it is like if we're going to try to establish this thing with the African diaspora, the first thing I did when I came back, I went to the Department of Foreign Affairs and I said, we pay taxes here and we would like to do this and we expect that we will get support to do this. And we must reject discrimination on whatever grounds. Because very often I find that because I've been subjected to a lot of discrimination, and in the end sometimes you just don't want, you want to pretend, but today where I am today is that you discriminate against me, you treat me in a racist way, I'm going to tell you that that is what you're doing. And of course we mustn't tolerate discrimination in our own ranks, on whatever grounds. And it is so important that we network, that we organize ourselves, and that we help each other. And this is where I think the Ghana Union has such an important role to play. So in conclusion, I would like to say we are co-creators of our time. And I think it's so important that we remember that. By our actions or lack thereof, we define the moment. So I think let us see the challenges, but also the possibilities. Let us remember where we come from with dignity. Because for me, this has been the only way that I have been able to help my children to survive with some form of sanity, is to imbue in them to be proud. Be proud of your Zulu grandmother. And because we shape the future for ourselves and our children, and each one of us can make a difference. And yes, Africa has problems, but also Africa is on the rise. The Portuguese are going to Angola to get jobs. Yeah. And we should also dare to turn the perspective around. And you know, and I met some guys, I was flying to Paris, and they were from Mozambique and from Angola, these top guys, you know, in oil, and so competent. But also the people, and I think there's a lot even about our own embassy, the South African embassy, or whatever embassies, is that the people that end up in positions of power must also remember where they come from and who put them there. You know, that oil doesn't belong to a few, it belongs to the people of Angola. So what I feel is that Africa is on the rise, and this is our time. And let's take the opportunities. Thank you. And that's, yeah, thank you.
We want to say a very big thank you for sharing this information with us. There are things we are aware of, but how to tackle them is another question. So I think that the only way we can tackle some of our problems is to meet like this, share ideas, and also discuss things that we are not aware of, and then we can find a way of at least getting near the problems. If we cannot solve them, at least we are aware of them, and we are also making an effort to solve them. So we thank you so much. Come again another time. It has been wonderful. And this is a little present from us. Thank you.
and I share it with the guys.
Thank you very much. Are you giving that?
Yes, I'm giving this book. Perhaps I'll take the pen away.
Okay. I don't think your
Or
pen-
perhaps I should contribute the pen. I'd like to create some African peace.
Can't the OAU be independent of the world powers? I'll give a typical example. Libya was invaded and occupied, and Gaddafi killed. Gaddafi was providing OAU with almost everything. But then when the West installed a puppet, and told them, now, he's the president, he's the boss of the Libya, he said yes. They could have said, look, since you have been installed by those people, Americans or whoever they are, go and join the union. But OAU was so quiet and didn't do anything about it. Why? How can we? Well, sorry, it's called African Union now. So this is why I say I don't have any hope in faith in the African Union. What can we do about this? Because they certainly disappointed a lot of us by accepting the dictates of the West, and they are still doing it. They send people to Chad because France is it's an occupation. They send African Union fighters, African soldiers to go to Chad, to go to Mali. And not because of Africa, because the West says so. How can we trust OAU with this?
Should we answer?
Yes,
the question?
please.
I think you are asking a very important question, but we should also place it in a context. Because I'll just give you an example as part answer to your question, is that at this summit, there were really some radical suggestions. And what many of us do not know is that the AU has somebody employed to listen in so that they do not say things that will irritate the West. It's also part of that. And part of this is the dependency. It is both the real dependency on aid, because as soon as we do something, like South Africa was punished for standing up at the climate change meeting in Copenhagen, and most countries then cut aid to South Africa. So, you know, there is a price to be paid. And my research is on international development, and this is exactly what you see in aid. There is such fear that if Africa stands up, they're going to lose the aid. And then one could say, why can't Africa cope without the aid? But the problem is very complex. I work in the Seychelles. I was advisor to the government of the Seychelles. And people were pumping money into the Seychelles. Why were they pumping money into the Seychelles? Because they were afraid of the Soviet Union. So they were using the Seychelles as this buffer. The Americans had, they had one thing and another. But when the wall fell, they all left the Seychelles. So you see, that was the Seychelles didn't need money, but they created a dependency, and when it suited them, they just left. So we are also part of that play. And then also then at another level, maybe there are certain leaders that do not have the stature, but they are leaders that definitely have the moral stature. That I'm totally convinced of.
My question is not because OAU, if African Union, it's a union now. Those they were calling Organization of African Union. It's now it is an African Union, which is one unit.
Yes.
So they cannot punish 53 countries if all of them say no. Can they do that?
It is true that perhaps they cannot do that, but then we need this process, this sense, because I really feel it as an uprising. We have to rise up against the new colonialism. And I think that has to take time. And we have to support Africa and strengthen their self-confidence and self-awareness. I agree with your criticism. It is valid. But in that, we have to see the complex picture. that there are some people actually trying to do a good job, and some of them, their hands are tied behind their backs because they are dependent on Western funding.
You want to answer the question?
No, contribution.
Our contribution.
Yes, please.
Well, before I start, I thank Allah and the Ghana Union for
The
the food. Well, you see, as I said, most of these governments, none of them is a government which has the support of the people. And I tell you, what your question, if these governments had the support of the people, they wouldn't be afraid of America or America and the European Union. But the problem is, as it is now, people are cut. There's no democracy. People are cut out from the powers. So any threat from America or from anybody, they have to succumb to it. But you cannot rule a country, you cannot be independent if you don't have the people behind you. And they don't have the people behind them. If they cut this aid, I mean, like the problem this is going to cause, shortage and if people supported their government, they will be able to stand against all these things.
Yeah.
Like without people support. Look at Cuba. I mean, nobody dared invade Cuba with all the tribulations and the problems. They had massive popular support. That was the only thing. Not even the Soviet Union that saved Cuba, but the people. They had people behind them. So we don't have democracy, we don't have the support of the people. And that's a big problem in Africa. They are not involved.
I think
It doesn't answer your question, but
maybe the first step we can take is finding a way to be independent from the drugs.
Yeah.
Those are those that make us vulnerable, so that it's like standing on a ladder with somebody holding it. Then you say you are kicking the person. He can kick you down.
Yeah.
And this is what we are afraid. So the first thing we must learn is to stand on our feet. Find a way to avoid those drugs. And maybe gradually we can do this, with education, how to stand on our feet. And then maybe we can go forward. Yes.
Just a comment on what you saying. One of the ways to cut our dependencies, I say, is almost 80% dependent on corruption. Because corruption is something which is killing our countries. You see, because if money which is being siphoned at corruption are being used for the benefit of the country, I think we could have stand a chance to stand so much less on this dependencies on these aids and foreign aids and all these things. You see, because when these monies are being used for the purpose of the country, but then I think, so many things that can be done. But billions are being stolen. But that has to go to infrastructures. And we always are receiving aids. See, where does it go? So corruption is the major cancer of our dependency on the Western aids.
Yes, and what is so important, thank you for your contribution, is that we, in that situation, we must find a way as Africans to hold our governments accountable, to meet that corruption. Because now what is happening, my field is development aid, and corruption is made into something inherent in being an African. So now we get the racism coming in saying all Africans are corrupt. So, and then we have to find a way forward where we must criticize our own people together with everybody else, but also not accept the generalizations and the insinuations that Africans are by nature corrupt.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Subero Yana.
At the last meeting when we met, actually you insist on, you emphasize how much is it for our children to get education. First of all, forget about the color, they get education, I'm sure we get something to do. There's some of us, I don't know how far we are, some of us are convinced that these discriminations, prejudice, and so on and so forth in Sweden and many parts of Europe are institutionalized. It's an institution democracy.
Yes.
You know, we are not entirely convinced that people, minority like us,
Yes.
can really fight it. Because, you know, when you go to Plata, you find those boys around there with Nero and Nika and all this type of thing. They are not powerful.
No.
They can only do that there and go home.
Mm.
You see, but when I look for employment at Valendale, see and many other places, what I face there is what counts in this country. And that is where you have the problems. That is where most of our children that are having educations are kept aside. You know, I mean, what can we really do? That's my question. I mean, we are not convinced that that decision is just anything you can just say for Plata, but we believe that it is the government control. We believe we are going to observe this election coming seriously. You know, we did that last year. So Ghana, last 4 years, so the Ghana Union had some money to take care of, to take part in the election, at least to give some information concerning the election. We experienced so many things, even from many of the party leaders. We talked to many of the party leaders also, but we strongly believe that, if we are wrong, we let us know. But we believe that they are kind of institutionalized democracy or prejudices that we have to do more to be able to fight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
For one thing, your observation has been confirmed by scientific reports. This is one of the issues that we are dealing with. And it really pains me. I've met so many people, so many young people. I've been discriminated against. My children have been discriminated against. But for me, the alternative, that they discriminate against us when we have no education, is worse. So what I'm saying is that let's get our education. I've come to the point, when I worked at the University of Umeå, they were down-marking black students that I knew were so good and they were getting so discouraged. I got 4 black students into the University of London. And today they have international degrees and Sweden can't touch them. So if the worst comes to the worst, honestly, get the education in Sweden. If they can't respect and use that, immigrate. Go to another country. This is what we have to, I must say, today I'm more aggressive as an anti-racist. Because I don't mean I'm going to shoot anybody, I don't mean that. But I go into clinches, I debate openly and I challenge people openly. But that also comes at a cost. Because when you are like that, you become the problematic African. You don't get jobs and they discriminate against you even more. But what is important is where I mean that, you know, just this fellowship we have today. Most of us here have experienced discrimination, where we have somewhere where you can rest and know that here I'm safe, I'm treated as an equal. But please, please do everything you can to encourage young people to believe in life and to believe in education. If this country can't accept and respect them, we must help them to leave.
Thank you.
Can I say something on this?
Oh, yeah?
I recently heard a radio program about a guy and a wife who have written a book pinpointing three factors which they think leads to success of immigrants. I think the book was written in America. And he used the case of, one of the case of Jews, that the first generation that comes do their best, they struggle, they do any kind of job to help raise their children. The second generation also do well, but then as time goes on, then the other people who were the third generation, we are no more aspiring as the initial people. But then he gave an exception, and that he said it was about the Jews. That the Jews has always felt insecure, and the second generation is as much as insecure as the first. They keep on fighting. So you see, the prosperity goes on further than other immigrants. Of course, this is a theory that he has. But I want to link this to our debate here. That our children must understand that even if it is hard to acquire education, even if after the education they don't have a job, there are other possibilities. Like she said, you with a Swedish passport, you can move on. And it has happened. Many people who were educated here in Sweden who couldn't get a job quickly had a job in England. I remember when I was learning Swedish, the Iranian colleagues, most of them were going to do tandläkare, dentist. Even the teacher made a joke. He said, people in Iran must have been having bad teeth. That everybody wants to be a dentist. Well, that's what happened. They didn't get a job here. Somehow somebody got to know this in England. They came and recruited all of them, most of them, and they did very well in England. So let's make sure that in spite of all the handicaps, in spite of all the frustrations, we should still make them aspire, and maybe even their children aspire to get the education, whatever they can get out of it. And then later on we see, if they still can't get a job here, they can find something else. They can go back to Ghana and work.
Yes.
Does it mean that black people in India, they do better, they have it better there than here?
Yeah, I think so, they do.
And
If
I'll
they
go
have the
there tomorrow.
education, they do better.
I'll go to England tomorrow.
Yes.
There are so many hands.
She wants to make a comment.
Just a short comment. And I can witness to that. In England, it was much better. There are some problems, but it's much better. And then also, even when with the comparison with the Jews, it's very valid. But we must never forget that as people of African descent, they just have to look at us, So we have this extra challenge where somewhere we have to combine the pride of being African, the positive sides of Africa, and claiming our rights.
Thank you.
May I just complete?
Kofi?
This question goes to Madam. In your talk about the African diaspora or the diaspora African outside, you mentioned several times that the diaspora in the US, from your speech, I have seen that they are doing better than the diaspora in the rest of the world. The African diaspora in the US. There were many examples, there were a few examples where you said those in the US are doing better. Is it true that those in the US are doing better? And if so, what should account for that?
For that. Yes, and actually, one could say that there's actually been a book. I wasn't very clear on what I meant by the diaspora in the U.S. It's part of the problem, but I can answer your question anyway. There's a book written about Somalis in Mississippi and Somalis in Malmö, I think, which indicates, has anybody heard of that book?
No.
And this indicates exactly that the Somalis in the U.S. are doing much better
Yeah, there was a program about it.
than they are doing in Sweden. Because somehow because what we have as a problem in Sweden is that it doesn't matter how hard you try. This institutional and structural racism knocks you out. And the other thing which I really meant at that time was that the African diaspora in their cooperation with Africa have come much further in the U.S. They are directly, for example, working with Nigeria and with other countries. They're involved in business ventures together. So, and that would be an opportunity that if we wanted to do something, to work, to see what they have done and perhaps see what the Ghanaians in the U.S. are doing and how one can work together.
And I also think that comparing this Mississippi and Malmö, I don't know what kind of social system they have in Mississippi, but here the social system makes you just useless. Every month you get your check coming in, you don't go to work. As long as they pay, sometimes they will even pay your rent for you. So they make you useless, you're never independent. So they can always look down upon you. Because if not, they are the drown, you cannot pay your rent, you cannot eat. So maybe these are some of the things we should also educate ourselves about, As long as they feed you, just like the way they treat our head of states. They give them big drugs, and then they cannot open their mouths. Yes, Vero.
These drones, I come back to my drones. It's quite, recently we heard that the Brazilians are using drones to detect some sabotage against their football field and so on and so forth. I never expected that it will be used in such a way. I want to ask Texan, are you sure we don't have drones in some part of Africa now?
Drones?
They have been many parts of Africa by French, by the Americans. Drones.
Yeah.
I think we don't have them now being used now in Africa.
Oh,
So
I
once
think-
the Europeans don't want their people to be killed.
I think I mentioned it, that they have drones stationed, what do you call airport,
Aha,
in Ethiopia.
In Djibouti.
And certainly they have in Djibouti, and
Ah.
even
Very recently, Congo.
yeah. So there's everywhere, you know. And then throughout your information, now the Germans are coming. Germany is claiming that now what they did before the Second World War should be forgotten.
Yeah.
Now they want to become a new power again, an armed one. So now they are advising their government that Germany should start arming. And the first place Germany is going is Mali. They have already even sent troops there to Mali to help Africa, as they say. So it's
To serve their own interest.
Adolf Hitler is back.
Yes, my brother.
Yeah, actually, I would like to comment first on this issue of education. And one of the things I've observed, especially in South Africa, is that children go to school to pass. And once they have passed, the parents are very happy. And if you give the same kids the same examination paper next year, they fail it follows borrows because they forgot what they learned. And I think the important thing is that we have a few educated people, but I don't think Western education allows us to think. We just absorb, and that's why we don't have this kind of problem-solving attitude. We are always concentrated on complaining about the situation. So I think it's very important because our education is actually European universities on African soil. We don't have what you might call an African education, and that goes as broad as we can. We can see we cannot think in our own languages because we think our languages are inferior to delve into astrophysics. You know, you cannot study biochemistry in Mandinga or Zulu. So we need to really restructure this concept, what we mean when we say a person is educated. Because ultimately, your education ends serving the West. To show you are very educated, you have to go to Germany, drive a Mercedes Benz. So, what is the purpose of education? That's my question.
The more we talk, is the more we realize how much problem we have. Yeah.
I was talking, I spoke earlier about the OAU. For this is very important. For instance, sorry, African Union. I remember in the 60s, Japanese and the Chinese were, even in Africa, we look down upon them and their products. Those of you who are old enough will agree with me that this was the case. Now, what has happened since then that the Japanese and the Chinese are now being respected as normal and even better than Europeans because they have taken it upon themselves to develop. Unless we as OAU decide in a way of trying to, because a Ghanaian black is a black person, South African black is a black person. It doesn't matter where you come from Africa, it is culture. Unless the whole group is able to unite and to prove that we as a group are better. So I think that somebody talk about education, we have to begin to show that the whole of Africa can develop and can do as much as if individual countries do it, it doesn't help anybody. So I still insist that this must come on the basis of the whole of Africa.
We must try to be rounding up.
I will start with your one, but this is where I think, because one of the things that the African Union is looking for, is involving us, thank you, in discussing the future of Africa. And this is where you could contribute this to the people that it concerns, who are the leaders of Africa. And the other thing, the figure that you took up, and an important part of that is that we took that up a bit before you came, is that it is important also that we recognize the validity of African solutions, that we have the self-confidence to test them and to respect them. Because, for example, the West assumes we do not have a philosophy. We do not have a philosophy of peace, of living together, of leadership. And this is, also listening to the two of you lecturing, I thought, oh my gosh, how do we get these two gentlemen to be lecturing to Swedish people? And this is also what we need to think about. What strategy, because now the time to feel sorry for ourselves, we've never felt sorry for ourselves, but it's time to act. Let's create the opportunity. Let's make sure that people like the both of you can lecture to bigger, audiences.
I just want to, about our lack of development, this poverty development, and only you, when you compare to you have the problem we have in 54 countries, the problem we have in 54 countries is almost the same as we have in one country. We have different ethnic groups, different regions, different resources. We have a state that have to make sure that all these differences are coordinated, the resources are shared, and then development takes place in all parts of the country. In fact, I must say that we as Africans, we have a bigger problem of building a state than the Europeans. Most of their states were around natural borders, around larger group of people. We didn't have that advantage. We have small pieces of land combined together. Yeah, exactly. So we have, on one hand, we feel sympathy for African leaders that they are
Cleaning up the mess.
yeah, they have to do more, and they have to be more honest, more intelligent, more forward-looking than a foolish man can lead Sweden, and Sweden will not go to hell. But you have a foolish man leading an African country, just drive the country into war. And this is the problem we face. And I had a free education in middle school, I had free education in training college, I had free education in university. And what I'm going to say is that now, if I were to go home and stay and pay back, this is what I mean by we got education, and but then it's not because we didn't want to go home. It is because when people who took power are not interested in getting people to come back or try even to chase the people who are not able to leave the country, then you cannot blame those of us who are living outside who have got education. But another strategy we can do today is maybe try to make situations conducive to, well, even if an African lecturer here can go home and teach even for 3 months, a course, and come back, it is still in the interest of the country. And we have so many sophisticated professors all over the world. But African leaders see some of us as threats. You can imagine what happened at the airport. You come from Europe. If I and a Swede should arrive, a Swede will pass and go, and I will be there with all those kind of, I am the national, yes. So it is this kind of attitudes and things which will help us to move forward. In the sense that if the leadership recognizes all this, that look, we have to bring our people home. We have to let our people come and invest in our country. Then we move on. At least the Iranians did that. Let's say the case of Iranians were that first they were captured as soon as they arrived at home. The Chinese did the same. You leave the country, you can't come back. Later on they realized that no, these are resources. Now they open places for them to come back. In fact, if you are today an Iranian, you want to go and invest in your country, they welcome you. These are the things I think we have to do back in Africa.
Okay, we have a last question.
Yeah.
The last one.
Yeah.
Why can't Africa do business with itself?
I think leaders want.
I can answer that. I can answer that. But I think
It goes to Mr. Waba's state. I don't know, should we believe that it's something like a phenomenon? Because I've been out somewhere whereby some people ask me, even if the West will change to Africa, and then Africa comes to the West, they will still make it a better place, and then we will still come back. I'm bringing this question with the point that this is a situation. I just heard you make mention that in your time it was free education, and that are those people who are sitting there. I take Ghana, the leaders that we have today have that free education, and they are still there, and each and any one of them are corrupt. That we never find any pure leader there who is thinking the good benefits of the nation, but rather he struggled hard to come there to take care of himself and his own family. Then I come with that, I understand that it's our mindset. And we have seen one who have been here that I never had a chance to meet him, Gabi Otridako. And that when you go in our archives, you see what they have done, which I understand he even lived here in Sweden. But still, they are corrupt. They've seen how this system is built, that we are running here to make a better life. And they go home, they participated, do whatever they can, they get a position in the parliament, and they are still corrupt, still thinking of their own benefits, but not of the nation. How can we change that mentality that we have? That's my question. For the next generations that are coming.
Because we have to clean here.
okay. Now, you see, I don't know, first, maybe a short answer to, is that why can't Africans, why can't we trade with one another? It's actually a problem of logistics. In fact, even within one country, regions do not trade with each other. You know, if you take one country like Ghana, to move goods from, let's say, the north of Ghana to the south of Ghana, it's not an easy task.
No.
And then, let alone to move from the west of Ghana to east of Ghana, it's also not easy. There was one that I don't bridge, I think they have. So structurally, it's very difficult. And then, we could, if way down in the 70s, when ECOWAS was formed, ECOWAS, I think, I don't know, Economic Community for West African, So they fought hard to establish ECOWAS, and then the French countries were wooed into joining the English-speaking countries into this ECOWAS. What did France do? France, right from the beginning, tried to sabotage Africa in the sense that they granted all the French-speaking West Africans, they forgave their debts, and all this, if they would not join ECOWAS. Oh yes, they did it. They won. Eventually, ECOWAS was formed, but the original ideas of inter-regional highways and this, well down. In fact, to cross the border from Accra to Abidjan is elevated. It's hell. Even though we are supposed to cross without passport, but a policeman says there that you don't have to give me the passport. I moved from Elubo at the border to Abidjan, the town, a journey that if you have a car, it takes 2 hours. We move 4 o'clock, we arrive in Abidjan at 12 midnight. Every 100 yards, there's a policeman. And every luggage, everything must be brought down to be searched. And you know that they will not search. The only way to avoid searching is to give money. And the next 100 yards, there's another one. It went on all the first, even though we have ECOWAS. So the infrastructure for this in fact, I call it even inter-regional trade within states. Yes, are not even developed. So it comes to the same problem that you see in a region like West Africa, and it goes on. So it's easier to lift the goods with to Europe than to take the thing from one town to another town in Ghana.
Okay.
Yes. Everybody here is talking about changing presidents, changing things, improving things in Africa. I will warn you, keep things in Africa as they are. If you try to change things, tomorrow the drones will come.
Ladies and gentlemen, as much as we would have wanted to continue this very interesting discussion, we must come to a close because time is very much against us. And then we have a brother and a sister here who have something else to show to us, and we also have to clean and pack this place. So, on behalf of Ghana Union, I want to say a very, very, very big thank you to our lecturers. Each one of them have given us food for thought. We go from here home, and then we think over all the things we have discussed here. And the next time we meet, maybe more topics will come up. This is just simply to show us that we need to meet like this quite often to talk through these things. We learn from one another and find a way of solving our 120 problems. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you for having us here. It's a huge pleasure for us to be here. We are coming from a conference called the RIA Money Transfer and Currency Exchange. And my name is Eleonora. I'm the store manager in Metro Southern Scotland, Central. And here is my colleague Isaac, who's from Ghana. And well, we are here because first of all, we wanted to contribute somehow and start working with the Ghana Union. Well, I can present our service. Our main service is to send money abroad, and we are sending money to Ghana. So we have really good prices and low rates. But also, what I want to tell you is that we would really like to contribute to put together the Ghana Union in Denmark, in Norway, and in Sweden. Through RIA, because you will need to have some sponsors who can help you to organize these things. So we would just want you to know that RIA wants to help and that we are open for any kind of things that you want to do. Yes, and that's it. Thank you. Do you want to say something?
Is it Eric or Isaac? Because you said Eric.
No, Isaac.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, as my boss has already said, yeah, RIA is nowadays doing well in the money transfer community. Ghana has been our major corridor. Why? Because a lot of Ghanaians are now outside. So RIA is doing well in terms of money transfer to Ghana. Gone were the days when it is very difficult to send money. But now with Western Union and RIA, why am I mentioning Western Union? Because majority of you know Western Union, but nowadays RIA has taken over. Why? Our prices are good, our rates are good. As I'm talking to you now, 1 Swedish crown for today is 0.394 in Ghana city. Very soon, I'm not saying that it should go to 4, but it will probably go to 4. So if you send money today, it's very, very good for you to get better rates as well as the charges as well. For example, when you send money through Western Union, you are going to pay for 1,000 crowns, you are going to pay 190. But when you send through RIA, you will pay just only 70 crowns. That makes us better than Western Union. And as gone were days, when you send money home, people usually use it in their own benefit. Why? Because they think that you are a horse here, working for them. RIA has designed something so special for our customers. This special thing that I'm talking about is by putting the money directly into your own account in Ghana. You can deposit the money rightly from Sweden to your own account in Ghana without anybody going for the money and then deposit it for you, which it will end up by going into the person's pocket. That makes RIA special. Again, in case, if any of you is, traveling outside, we have dollars we exchange.
When you exchange through us, we don't take fee. We don't take fee, but other companies, they do. That makes Ria also special.
You mean you can buy dollar from you?
Yeah, we sell dollars, all the currencies.
Is it not the market rate you also use?
Yeah, well, that is why we are here. We can sometimes negotiate as Africans. We all know bargaining powers. So sometimes we can negotiate. With my boss here, we are so simple, and then we can sometimes come to your need as well. So we are saying that
We have questions to ask.
yeah, we are saying that our doors are open. We know that Ghana has been our major corridor, as well as Nigeria and Gambia. But as when I started RIA 3 years ago, we were doing maybe 25 transactions per month. But as I'm talking to you now, we can do more than 200 in a month, which is telling us that our services has been understood by the Ghanaians. So that is why we are here to enlighten people that RIA is doing well in the Ghanaian community. So we want you people to be on board so that we'll be able to, sell out the product of RIA.